What's going on, everyone? This is Brown Simpleman Comics, and this is the hot and cold list for the week of July 17th, 2019. As always, got my co-host Jack DeMeo, aka Mr. Bolo, with me. What's going on, Jack?
Man, it's a good week. Very excited. It's San Diego Comic-Con. It's coming up, so you know there's a lot heating up in the market.
Right, so we have a really great list for you. We also have another guest pick this week, and it's going to come from Rod at Just a Rican in his comics. So thanks, Rod, for providing that pick. We'll show that in just a minute. But before we get into that guest pick, let's bring up the list of the contributors that make up the hot and cold list.
Yeah, so we got a couple people on the DL this week. We're missing Mighty Mel V of the Mighty Mel V YouTube channel. And of course, we're missing Andy Tomberlin from the In Spotlight series. But like Brian mentioned, we've got Rod from Just a Rican in his comics, a great YouTube channel that Brian and I actually appeared on this week. And he's filling in very nicely. So we're bringing you 7 hot picks and 4 cold picks this week.
Right. So with that being said, we're going to roll right into the hot list this week, starting with our guest pick, Rod from Just a Rican in his comics.
CBSI Nation, what's going on? Hello, everyone. I'm your boy, Rod the Rican. If you've never seen me before, check out my channel. It's called Just a Rican and his comics. There's live shows going on there. There's one on Sundays at 4 o'clock, one on Tuesday at 8, and Saturday at 8 as well. And always there's a free giveaway every month. But my book for the hot list is going to be Flash, issue 74. Yes, guys. It's that Barry Allen origin, all right? Starting point for anyone out there that wants to start reading Flash. It's called Year One. And I got the first 4 issues right now. I'll show you them. It's issue 70, so that's where you want to start off at. So check your LCS, see if they have it. I'm pretty sure you can still find it. It's pretty neat. It shows, how he got his powers, how he's trying to cope with them. He's at the hospital, just freaking out, running around. Just going through shoes, and then he time travels. It's pretty neat, man. And he runs them to his future self. Man, it's dope. And fighting villains. Actually, that's the villain right there. I don't want to tell you too much. You have to go out and get it, and that's my book for the hot list, guys. Go check it out tomorrow at your LCS. Get them while you can, dudes, because it's hot. Josh Williamson and Howard Porter, these guys are killing it on this book. This artwork is amazing. The story is written very, very good. So check it out. I'm pretty sure you will not disagree with me.
So there we have it, Jack. Rod from Just a Rican in his comics. Fantastic YouTube channel before we even start getting into his pick. We were honored to be guests on there, had a great time. Dan Piercy, who's also author on comicbookinvest.com and a person who provides picks on this list, he's been a guest on there. But Flash Year One, hot pick for Rod. What do you think about this pick?
Well, I really like this pick. I may be a little bit biased. I really enjoyed reading this Flash run. Ever since Rebirth, I think Flash has really ascended as a series to one of DC's really kind of forefront, well-written stories that seems to have solid reader buzz. Now, coming from a comicbookinvest.com perspective, it hasn't really seen the secondary market success, meaning the Year One storyline. There were some first appearance issues earlier in the run, obviously, that definitely did well on the secondary market. But I think that's really just due to what's been happening over the last, say, month to 2 months. There's been a lot of new characters popping up in first appearances and a lot of incentive variants that have really kind of polarized the hobby. I mean, look at Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the end of Walking Dead, what we've got going on this week with Silver Surfer Black and Captain Marvel. When you have stuff like that happening, that tends to take speculator attention. And we talk a lot on this channel about the fact that speculators can only pay attention to so many things at one time, at least. But it's interesting that you mentioned Dan Piercy, who definitely put us on to Just a Rican in his comics, Rod's excellent channel. Dan has a pick, which I don't want to spoil later on, that really ties into this pick here, because I think that the key, if you're speculating on the ability to sell this run, is selling it as a set. It's probably the best way you're going to be able to do it, because I think that people are a little late getting on this Year One storyline. And we know that Year One stories have been iconic for both Batman and Superman. So Flash getting that Year One treatment is really cool. And if people are late getting on it, they may not be able to find every issue in their LCS, causing them to go to eBay and look for those completed sets. So I think that would probably be the best way to market and sell these sets and these issues. But at the same point, I would say be on the lookout for these Flash Year One issues, because I agree with Rod. It's been a great story. Brian, I know you're a fan of it. You actually put me on to it when it was just beginning through the Wednesday Warrior article on comicbookinvest.com. And it's definitely one to keep an eye out for, because there's a chance it could really move up.
Right. I'll just say that with all this turtle talk going on right now, there's one turtle from this Flash Year One story that we aren't talking about. That is fantastic in this issue. I agree with Rod's pick. It might not be hot on the secondary market, but it's a fantastic read. Yeah, you might go, oh, another origin type story, but Year One, all the Year Ones have been fantastic when you read them. Batman, Superman going on right now with, was it Frank Miller, right?
Yeah, Frank Miller and John Romita Jr.
Yeah. But Joshua Williamson, Howard Porter, Flash, their whole run in Flash has been good. But this Year One, really enjoying it right now. So definitely agree with it being on the hot list. And thank you, Rod, for that pick. And moving right on to the next pick in the hot list this week, we have the comicbookinvest.com Hot 10 writer himself, Ben Stein.
Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Ben S. Comicbookinvest.com Hot 10 writer. I just wanted to say what's hot for this week. One, look at this view. Look at that. Holy moly. Just take a glimpse. Anyway, boys, what's hot this week? Graded video games. They are the best thing right now going. There's all kinds of high dollar things. If you haven't looked it up, it's WATA is the grading company. Look that up on eBay. If you've got any old video games, get them graded, get them sold. I'll see you.
So, big kudos to Ben for getting us a hot pick while he's on vacation in the wilderness with the Von Trapp family singers. Graded video games, Jack. This has been talked about on the Tales from Flipside podcast as well. Heritage was starting to carry graded video games. But what do you think about this pick?
Well, I think it's spot on to be hot. Now, maybe a little bit outside the realm of what we normally talk about. Obviously, we're a comics channel. Comicbookinvest.com is a comic book website. But the reason why this is really valid is you're seeing these pop up more and more at comic book conventions. More and more dealers are carrying both video games and graded video games, especially those games that cross over into the comic book world. We're seeing things like Maximum Carnage, the Ninja Turtles. I've seen that G.I. Joe. There was a foreign release of G.I. Joe that I recently found out about. Things like that are kind of great crossover items and are drawing the attention of even comic book investors. But where I first became aware of it was actually the owner of CGC's Instagram account. I started noticing he was posting a lot about his personal investment stock of sealed brand new video games, talking Nintendo, Atari, and most of them were these kind of key properties that crossed over with the comic book market, and he's getting them graded and showing off a lot of these. And then I started to see some other prominent speculators and retailers following suit. I think it's a market that is just now beginning to boom. And before you go and say, oh, graded video games, that's silly, you got to look at everything has been graded at this point. It started with coins, it moved to baseball cards, comics, action figures, and now we're seeing video games. And there's always a demand once you're talking about an item that is truly collectible and truly valuable to differentiate between two sealed video games, which one is truly in better condition. And that helps to set that market price. So this doesn't surprise me that this is becoming a popular thing. I'm actually, if anything, surprised that it hasn't gotten hot earlier. But I think it's a very perceptive pick by the writer of our Hot 10 article on comicbookinvest.com, a guy who really has his finger on the pulse of what's selling in the market, especially through eBay and, as you mentioned, Heritage Auction and other places like that. So shout out to Ben Stein. I hope you're enjoying your vacation. It looks beautiful out there. And I think definitely a great perceptive pick.
And with that being said, we're going to move right on into our next hot pick, and it comes from the Reading Pile author, Dan Piercy.
Hey, this is Dan Piercy of dpiercyscomics.com, home of the Reading Pile on CBSI. My hot pick this week is one that I'm excited about. I hope you will be too. It's selling comics in sets. I woke up this morning to an eBay alarm notifying me that I'd sold this set of Immortal Hulk books, 11 through 20. We touched upon this a bit last week that it was a good idea to sell Walking Dead books 191 through 193 in set, and these two sales have covered my comic book pickups for the next 4 weeks, I'm guessing. I love that about this hobby. I hope you do too. So that's my hot pick for this week. Selling comic books in sets. Do that. See ya.
Dan Piercy, always the character, but always providing us with good picks. Selling books as sets. We've touched on it he's touched on it on this show. We've touched it on the Bolo show. Good. We just touched on it 2 picks ago. But what do you think about this hot pick, Jack?
Right. I didn't want to spoil too much when we were talking about Rod's pick, but definitely Dan is somebody I'm in several group chats with, and he has posted some sales that are truly impressive. And when you say that these sales are impressive, what I mean by that is not only is he selling specific issues that you may have a hard time being able to sell, but he's selling them for prices you wouldn't be able to get for them individually by any means. I've seen him sell like a run of the later Immortal Hulk issues. These are issues that typically go cover price for as much as $10 an issue. And it's because there are people who are getting on these series late, and when they go to their LCS, they just can't find these reader buzz books. Now, these books may not be popping in the secondary market individually, but because there's such a solid reader buzz and people are buying them and keeping them, that they become tougher to get. And if you start buying them individually on eBay and paying, say, $4 to $5 for a book plus shipping, that can get expensive. And you've got to get them from a bunch of different places. You've got to worry about each individual seller and how much their shipping quality may vary. And we're going to talk a little bit about shipping quality later. So it's one of those things where being able to get them all from one place at one time in that convenience, people are always going to pay for that convenience. So Dan has long been an advocate of that. And I know, like, as Brian said, we've talked about that on the Bolo show. And we've actually advocated that people look to do that, as Dan said. But another thing that I want to bring up is something that Dan mentioned about paying for his pulls. What Dan frequently does, and what I've seen others do that I think is very successful, is he's a reader. So he buys these books, he reads them, and once he gets up to about 10 issues, he sells them, and now he's paid for the next 10 issues, and then some. So that's another thing to look at, because this hobby is expensive. Take the speculation out of it. Just collecting, just reading, the weekly books that come out, paying for your pull list. This can be a drain on some people. So the ability to keep that money flowing and to keep you getting new books to read is something that also has a good bit of value. And I think, as Dan mentioned, The Walking Dead is one to look at. I'd say Immortal Hulk, any really epic run that's going on right now. Venom, big storylines, what's going on with Batman right now, going into City of Bane. These are stories to pay attention to, that if the market's paying attention to them, you can lot them up and you can get good money for them. And another thing to look at would be miniseries. The prices of miniseries tend to go for inflated amounts for the entire series, more than you'd get for that individual issue.
So that's another great pick from Dan, and we're going to roll right into the list now with Run the Tables author Clint Joslin.
Good afternoon, CBSI Nation. Clint Joslin coming to you with my hot pick of the week. And my hot pick of the week this week is anything in tandem with Swamp Thing and Constantine. And I think there's a reason why that I'll go into in just a second. But if you look at Saga the Swamp Thing 37s, if you look at Hellblazer 1s, they are really starting to move. A little tidbit to that is I don't think people realize how difficult a 9.8 of Saga the Swamp Thing number 37 is. You see a lot of 9.4s, a lot of 9.6s. But a 9.8 is difficult because of the color, it's yellow. Because of the paper, it's more difficult. But if you have one of those books or the Hellblazer one, you may want to look at putting it up pretty soon. I think we're seeing a connect the dots with the one shot from Under the Sandman label of Constantine coming October 30th, and the ride that everybody's taking on Swamp Thing right now being such a popular TV show. I've said for a long time, these two are like peanut butter and jelly. And I think that Swamp Thing and Constantine, we are going to see them together on screen at some point. That very well may be by why these books are starting to move. But I would really start to look at these two characters, their first appearances, key issues, because I'm telling you, when they start to, when the announcement comes, they're already hot because people are buying low. But when the announcement comes, these are going to skyrocket. These two are amazing together. If you've read their stuff, it's pure gold. So my pick of the week is Swamp Thing, Constantine tandem books.
So there we have Clint's pick. Good to see him back from vacation or made up with the wife. I don't know if he was on vacation at the beach or kicked out living in the tent the last time, but good to see you back in the house, Clint. And Swamp Thing, Constantine. You know what's funny about this? As we always say, comic book collecting is cyclical. We saw these same issues that were hot now, or picking up steam now, they were hot then as well. Like this Swamp Thing number 37, the first appearance of Constantine, when that show was coming out, which, of course, didn't last very long, right?
Right,
But
no.
these issues are starting to heat back up again. In fact, I just went out and bought a Swamp Thing number 1 myself this past couple weeks online. But these are books that are starting to heat up, especially with that DC Universe show. Even though it got canceled, fantastic show. Finally caught up on it. But what do you think about this pick, Jack?
Well, I like this pick. It's funny. I'm actually preparing to set up at a comic convention within the month, and I was going through kind of books, looking for what books to kind of display as wall books, and I pulled out a Hellblazer number 1 that I kind of forgot I had, and I was really debating on it. That's a classic old school wall book, but I was really surprised by how low they were going for a good week ago. But watching the trends over this last week, I think Clint is really spot on. I've seen a lot of them selling, and the prices started to creep up, especially for those high-grade copies, which are tough to find. I think you hit the nail on the head about the Constantine show didn't really work out. The movie with Keanu Reeves didn't have kind of the staying power they would have hoped. So the comic market is very cyclical because we've seen these books pop prior to those events. But Swamp Thing's been hot. We see Vertigo stuff, while post-announcement, it looked like everything was going to be dead in the water, has started to really heat up with now all of a sudden Sandman landing on Netflix. I think there's a lot of anticipation that we're going to see more big things from these really dark characters. And I think that the actor who plays Constantine he played him on the TV show and he played him in the crossovers with the other CW shows, Matt Ryan, has done a phenomenal job depicting the character. So I think that Warner Brothers has plans there. I would also throw another book out, Swamp Thing 67, which has a preview of Hellblazer number 1. So for all of you True First fans, shout out to Topher and FOMO the Puppet Speculator, as depicted on Brian's shirt right now, available on simplemanscomics.com. Hit that merch tab. I think that's an issue to keep your eye on. That is an issue that in previous times has been popular, especially within the CBSI crowd, who tends to seek out these previews and these kind of true firsts. Now, again, Hellblazer number 1 is not John Constantine's first, but it is the first solo series. I would also keep an eye on the fact that they've announced again that now Constantine and Hellblazer are going to fall under the Sandman universe in the current publishing cycle. And I think that that's important, is by reattaching these characters, there's a lot that can happen. And I think we're all kind of waiting and fiending for that Justice League Dark to show up, whether it's in a TV show or in a movie. And I want to shout out a member of the Simpleman's Comics family who constantly brings this up, Shane Griffin, a.k.a. DC Deadman fan on Instagram, who is probably the biggest Justice League Dark fan you're going to find. And he's been speculating for a long time we're going to see this. And I think that the community is ready for it. So now's the time to buy up these issues if you see them, because they're trending up, and you may catch people at shows and conventions who aren't pricing these up to where the current market is, especially that Hellblazer 1 and that Swamp Thing 67.
So really good pick from Clint Johnson, and we're going to move right now into Mike Morello, Cover Tunes author's hot pick for this week.
Hey everybody, Mike Morello from CBSI's Cover Tunes with my hot pick this week. And this week I am going with something I've noticed at the conventions I've been at so far this year, mostly Heroes Con, Fanboy Expo, and a few smaller ones. The thing that I see moving off the shelves, no matter whether it's vintage or modern, is everything to do with this little lady right here, Vampirella. It's amazing. I'll see magazine boxes full of Vampirella at the beginning of a show. I'll go back at the end and they're shredded. There's nothing left. Variants are selling. Regular issues are selling. Obviously, the vintage magazines, especially the early numbers, are selling. And I think that obviously has to do with the new series that drops today. Actually, this is all we've seen of it so far, is the preview from Free Comic Book Day. But it looks enticing. We'll have to see if it's any good. But either way, variants for it, store variants that are limited, have sold out pretty much within hours, which is a great testament to just how popular the character is. Obviously, the character has always sold well. She's had a cult following for ages, but there's definitely an uptick right now in how well she's doing. Clearly, things like big keys like her #1. This is a huge book, and it's tough for a lot of people to get. But what's really nice is there is a facsimile of that just dropped today. But I'm really more sort of intrigued with the later issues with beautiful covers that still sell well, and a lot of the sort of famous artists that have done her modern stuff. Obviously, there's the Adam Hughes stuff. This is probably one of, if not the most famous one, and that has been homaged by Hughes for this new one as well. Of course, the Perillos, much like the Red Sonias that I talked about a couple of weeks ago, you've got these beautiful Perillos. He was just made to do these covers, and these are selling really well right now. They're going up and up and up. Books that were $10, $15 a year or two ago, some of these are up close to $100 now a piece, which is unbelievable. They're tough finds, especially in high grade. I've always been a fan of this Mayhew run. There's actually 2 Mayhew runs. This is my favorite of them. There's also virgins of all of these. So keep that in mind. So there's some really rare ones there, and those fly too. And then, of course, a personal favorite is the Jenny Frisson run. And these may be some of my favorite covers of all time. These are also selling very well. Obviously, that has to do with Frisson's popularity as well as Vampirella's popularity, but you get 2 big factors in one, and it makes for books that really sell. But really, everything Vampirella seems to be popular right now. It's one of the highest volume sale things I've seen in person at shows and in shops. On eBay, I don't really have the details for how much sale is happening in eBay sales, but I assume it follows the trend of what I'm seeing at shows and in shops. That's my hot pick for the week. Everything Vampirella, both vintage and modern.
So Jack, cool Mike, hot pick. Vampirella. As we know, 50th anniversary just came. They're celebrating the 50th anniversary with the new series that started today that had a whole bunch of covers, but a lot of the covers were actually really good. They had a lot of great covers for it. My favorites were, of course, they had the Alex Ross cover. I like the regular variants, not so much the black and white, but they also had this 1 in 100 Frazetta homage cover to the very first issue, as like he said, the replica for the first issue of Vampirella as well. It's weird because I don't think Vampirella is ever really cold because there's always that cult following, which is what Mike kind of mentioned. But they are seeing an uptick, especially with this new issue today. And people, those store variants, I'm not a big store variant person, but there's a lot of those pretty covers out there. But what do you think about this pick, Jack?
I love this pick. And I'm not the biggest expert on like the vintage magazines that he, has highlighted in his video, but I know Mike is. And it's incredible the prices that they're going for. When you go check out sold listings, you just see that increase.
Yeah, they're over 1,500, 1,200, if not more.
Right. So it's that they're tough finds and they're in incredible demand. As far as moderns go, I think Mike is spot on. The last few volumes have had just so much amazing cover art. It seems like great cover artists are drawn to this series, and you just see it time and time again. It's funny when I think the big thing is the issue coming out today, and I think that's where it's gotten kind of speculator interest, seeing all, as you mentioned, the store variants. Well, I like a lot of these store exclusives, and a lot of them have been great cover art. I actually think the incentives have better cover art and are getting overlooked because of all these store exclusives. If you look at the secondary market as of the recording of this video on Tuesday evening, we're not seeing these move above ratio. But there's some that I think are absolutely gorgeous. And I knew you would pick the Ross and Frazetta, which is fine because my 2 favorites are actually different ones. I like the Adam Hughes book only because I think, man, who homages themselves? that to me makes me laugh. So the AH after AH is funny. I think that there's 2 versions. There's the trade dress and the black and white version, which I believe are 1 in 10s and 1 in 25s. But in my opinion, the one to be on the lookout for is the art germ variants. It's a 1 in 15 and a 1 in 25. And the reason why these are the ones to look at is they're called FOC variants. And we talk about FOC here on the Simpleman's Comics YouTube channel a few times. For those of you who are new, getting into the hobby, or maybe just don't know, aren't aware, FOC means final order cutoff. And that is the last day in which to order your books and be guaranteed your allotment of books from Diamond Comic distributors. When an FOC variant comes to be, similar to those story variants that we talked about with Mighty Morphin Power Rangers 40, they come up at the last second, meaning they're not in the previews magazine. So any store that ordered, say, put their diamond order in extremely early and just let it sit and then didn't come back and check, they may have missed that these variants were added on the last day for FOC. Another situation is if a store missed FOC, and you'll be surprised how often that happens, and they put their order in after FOC just hoping to get whatever they can get, they also wouldn't be able to get these art term variants. So my speculation is that we're going to see less of those two variants than several of the other incentives that are on the market. Also, if you look at the cover art of that art term variant, it's absolutely gorgeous. You get kind of a foil feel with the blood dripping down and then creating that iconic Vampirella costume. The 1 in 15, it has the trade dress. The 1 in 25 is a virgin. And I think that is one to definitely be on the lookout for. But as I mentioned, these are currently selling at depressed values, largely due to the attention on the store exclusives and the fact that store exclusive stores have so many of these incentives because there were such a kind of almost gluttony of incentives released for this book that they're selling them at a low market price. Another one that we didn't mention is actually J. Scott Campbell. J. Scott Campbell has a 1 in 75 variant. And obviously J. Scott Campbell is, a heavyweight in the market and on the secondary market. And he's especially known for these female covers. But the funny thing is, I almost think he's outshined a little bit with so much great cover art from, like you mentioned, Alex Ross and Frank Frazetta, the absolute legend, as well as what I think Art Germ was able to put out and the kind of like funny Adam Hughes homage to himself in the #1 issue. So be on the lookout for these if you're hitting the comic book shop. If you missed them today and you're heading out tomorrow or over the weekend, be on the lookout for these because I think you're still going to be able to find these incentives at a reasonable price. And with Vampirella and everything Vampirella being hot right now, there's a good chance we're going to see some of these prices rise as collectors are more aware of them and start picking which ones are the ones to get.
And a comic that's not Vampirella that also came out today that I think could also fly under the radar, but people are probably somewhat aware, is that Lucio Perillo variant, the 1 in 25 for the Elvira.
I totally agree. I think it has a chance to be hotter than the Vampirella ones because it's an issue #7. So it's not this #1. Nobody's doing store variants. And there's so much attention to Vampirella that book is kind of flying under the radar. But it's in the same vein. It's in these iconic classic 70s series kind of characters. And obviously there's some famous busty ladies that cover artists have depicted over the years. So yeah, I think that's a great point, Brian.
So that's another great pick from Mike Morello, and we're going to move right on to the next pick, and it comes from the Usual Suspects author, Peter Renna.
What's up, everybody? This is Peter Renna, writer of Dollar Bin Digging, Usual Suspects, and Wizard Rewind for comicbookinvest.com, and this week my hot pick would have to be Paper Girls. With last week's announcement that got optioned by Amazon for a series order, season order, whatever you want to call it, this found itself on the Hot 10 list that Ben Stein put out last Friday, and 9.8s were up to like $100 from when they were only about 60 the week before. But even so, it's still getting hotter, and 9.8 auction just ended on Sunday for $142. And it's not just #1s, as sets and lots have been moving as well, whether they're full runs from 1 to 29, that's out so far, or even just shorter runs up to 15, broken runs, different lots. Things are moving. This book is drawing interest. A lot of comparisons to Stranger Things. It's a very good read by Brian K. Vaughan. I'd highly recommend reading it, and I think it'll make a great series. And that's one of the reasons why I think it's hot and it's gaining a lot of steam. So looking forward to seeing this, and that's my hot pick for this week.
Did he say Stevie Ray Vaughan?
No, I think he said Brian K. Vaughan.
So there we have it. Hot pick from Peter Renna, Usual Suspects author, Paper Girls. What do you think about this, Jack?
This is a good pick. This is one actually in my household I'm pretty familiar with. My girlfriend, mother of my children, the beautiful Kirby Springs, she's a very big Paper Girls fan. So, I've always tried to get my family and different family members into comic books, and this is one that she has really gravitated to and has read the trades and is a big fan of this. So she was really stoked to hear about the Amazon announcement. So as I've mentioned with different properties like Power Rangers, which my brother's a big fan of, things like that, is it may not be something that I'm personally into. And it's not that I'm saying anything bad about Paper Girls. I just haven't read it yet. But when somebody around me gets so passionate about something, it tends to pique my interest and something I pay attention to as a speculator. And there was just so much reader buzz for Paper Girls. And where I think the spec value comes in is the fact that, to use the example, and it's why I bring up my girlfriend, is the fact that she's not your typical comic reader, but she loves that series, which I think is going to play very well when the show comes out on Amazon. I've talked on this channel before about how I'm skeptical of how Amazon shows will hold up over the long run, if they'll be able to really penetrate the speculation market. I think we're going to get a good view of that on July 26th when The Boys debuts on Amazon. I'm very hopeful that that will do well. But I think Brian K. Vaughan seems to have some major connections in Hollywood. His stuff seems to be ripe for being picked to option. And I think that this is a great pick from Peter. This is a series that I think is going to continue to rise in interest. And as you mentioned, people may not have been aware of it. As soon as it came out, it was a solid reader buzz book, but never really commanded more than, say, like $8 to $10 on the secondary market at its initial release peak, and then kind of dropped back to a cover price book. But it is cover price no more. As Peter mentioned, $20 book. I think it's going to stay at that level until we get kind of some casting announcements and maybe get closer to like trailer time, which is going to be a ways away. But if you missed out on it, that would be my biggest suggestion, is to wait, see what happens, and when those prices start to depress a little bit, jump on it. But if you haven't read it, head to Amazon, head to your LCS, pick up those trades, check it out. There's a lot of spec value, as we talk about on this channel, from reading, and you can really glean if there's going to be anything more than, say, issue 1 as far as spec value. But like we talked about with Dan's pick, and like Peter mentioned in his video, lotting those issues up together is also a great way to turn value. So if maybe you don't have number 1, but you've got several issues in the run, put those together. Now is the time, because people are searching eBay right now for Paper Girls.
Yeah. Imagine that. Selling it as a set. Seems to be a pattern there. But I agree. Great pick from Peter. And our last pick on the hot list this week comes from the mass speculator himself, Topher S.
What's up, everybody? It's the Mass Speculator, and I'm back to tell you who's hot this week. You know who's hot? This guy, Knull. Knull's hot. Yep, another week where a dude is hot. Donny Cates' villainous dark god has managed to live up to the hype, and another when new characters are a dime a dozen. Cates has managed to integrate Knull into the Marvel Universe seamlessly, and it kind of feels like he's always been there. That's not easy to do. Have his books exploded? No, but that's not a bad thing. Sometimes it's better for these game changers to build slow, and thankfully, Cates seems to really know how to do this with only rare missteps. You know, the more I think about it, Donnie's hot too.
So there we have it, Jack. Topher's talking Knull, Donny Cates, Venom. We all know we had Knull on this list a couple weeks ago, but hot is hot, right, Jack? So what do you think about this pick?
All right, so it's funny you bring up that pick, Brian, from a couple weeks ago, because when Mel V from the Mighty Mel V YouTube channel brought that pick up, my response was that I'm actually in sell mode with Knull. And Mel actually commented on the video calling me crazy. And, you know, it appears he may have been right. My perspective on that just came from the ROI of those cover price books to where they're sitting at now. But it seems like the demand for Knull is just not ending. Now, there is so much confusion about first appearance. While, yes, Venom number 3 has been deemed that book, there's a lot of talk about, could he have showed up earlier, later? What do we consider that first appearance? And I think that is just people who have that FOMO, who may have missed out, who are trying to push things and sway things. Those comic book politics are getting played in there. But it's funny when you look at Venom number 3, we're seeing those later prints sell well. We're seeing us going to Silver Surfer Black, that second print with Knull on the cover. That has really done a lot. Is Knull coming into that Silver Surfer series gives more credence to this character than being just kind of a one-off villain in the Venom series. So definitely this is a popular character and one that looks like maybe here to stay. And at this point, why would you doubt anything Donny Cates does? He seems to have his finger on the pulse of the secondary market, even though when I've interviewed him, he says he really doesn't pay a ton of attention to the secondary market. The secondary market is surely paying attention to him. So evidence of that, look at today's Silver Surfer Black #2. A lot of talk about that and the 1 in 25 Martin incentive variant. So I'll say to the mass speculator Topher and the mighty Mel V, of course, I think you guys are right. Knull is continuing to be hot and looks like he's going to stay that way for a while. And I have no problem with a pick being on this list that was previously on this list, especially if it's still hot. I think that that's really the case here and probably will continue that way for some time.
So there we go, guys. That's Topher's pick, and that wraps up the hot list.
Hi guys, I'm Sarah from the Simpleman's Patreon group. Our hot pick for the week is still Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. We have number 51, which is Jenica's first appearance. Some will argue that it's number 52, so keep an eye out for that. This is the 1 in 10 incentive. And then we also have number 95, which is Jenica's first turtle appearance. We're on the road to 100, guys. There's a lot of variants coming out, so don't pick the first one that you see.
But we're going to roll right into the cold list now, starting with Run the Tables author Clint Jocelyn.
Good afternoon, CBSI Nation. Clint Jocelyn coming to you with my cold pick of the week. And my cold pick of the week is something that's cold now that probably will really help you if you can go to your LCS bins, look online, a couple other places. But my cold pick of the week is DC New 52 1 in 25 variants, specifically ones at the beginning of the end and at the end of the end. Babs Tarr, Ben Oliver, Andy Kubert, a couple other ones, big artists that have some runs that were really, really good within this New 52 125s, but they're down in price. I'm talking some are even going for $5, $10 if you can find them. These books are going to disappear. These books are not something that's prevalent on the back end, especially towards the end of the runs or the middle of the runs. So my cold pick of the week that could be hot down the road is DC New 52 1 in 25 variants. There's some sketch variants in there too, but we're talking big artists that have shown big dividends in the past. And I just can't believe even what some of these 9.8s are going for is because everybody's forgotten about them. Everybody's concerned with the latest and greatest. So go, if you can find those, buy them. DC New 52 1 in 25.
Jack, so there we have Clint's cold pick, right? And I like how he turned a cold pick into a positive. Like we always say, a lot of these cold picks are make for great buying opportunities. I buy up those New 52 1 in 25s cheap all the time, especially when those Midtown sale goes on and they're like 75% off. TFAW, all those sales, you'll always find a lot of those New 52 1 in 25s or even higher variants. So I picked up a lot of those Batman 21s, a lot of the Batman variants. But what do you think about Clint's pick?
Well, it's a great pick. Obviously, like the steampunk variants have commanded a large secondary market following due to a lot of them being extremely low printed. They showed up on the recent comicbookinvest.com Hot 100 variant list. But other than that, we've seen a lot of depression within the 1 in 25 variants of New 52. Now, when I first saw this list, Brian will tell you, my reaction was, oh, those are cold. But when I did a quick eBay search, Clint's spot on. It's definitely lower, significantly lower than they were trading for recently. And I think really that's just indicative of the market. When you look at incentive variants, if they're not, say, iconic artwork, and the bar for iconic artwork is extremely high. That doesn't mean any of these are bad art or not even excellent or, as Brian would say, fantastic artwork. Yeah. The reality is that if they're not a first appearance or they're not just, iconic artwork, people just move on. But I agree that there is so many of these that are trading below what they should be. I'll point out the Death in the Family Batman issues as a prime example. Those Capullo incentives at one point were just the talk of the hobby. Brian mentioned the key issue of Batman 21, the first appearance of Duke Thomas. I would absolutely say that is a good pick. I think Duke Thomas is an up-and-comer in the DC universe. And I will pick two that are kind of random, but I'll give you the reasoning behind them. The first one that I'll say is Wonder Woman 13. The 1 in 25 incentive features Wonder Woman fighting Cheetah. I've mentioned that issue before on the Simpleman's Comics YouTube channel because we know that Cheetah is going to be the villain in the next Wonder Woman movie. And I have high expectations for that appearance. And I think that there's very little variance outside of these kind of new DC cover B style of variants that depict Cheetah. So this is probably the most limited print run Cheetah variant that exists in the market at this point, and the market has yet to really pay attention to it. Another one I'll point out is Detective Comics 40. This features very early Big 2 cover art by current DC cover heavyweight Jenny Frison, and it's a really great Batman cover. It really kind of was a lot of people's first introduction to Jenny Frison, and being a 1 in 25 incentive, even with a higher printed series like Detective Comics, it is more limited than you would realize, almost a ghost on eBay at this point. Not one yet that has really popped yet on the secondary market, but one I am always searching for in back issue bins, and very happy to snag up for $5, $10, $15, because I think that it has good long-term potential as more collectors really start to eye Frison as one of those A-list cover artists. So I think that those are very good picks. And I think that a large reason why we're seeing those books kind of almost get overlooked is DC then switched to the theme month cover B variant. So we started to get, whether it was the Looney Tunes covers or the Joker covers or the Flash covers. Yeah, the lenticulars. So they started doing all of these themes. And people soon forgot that all of those early DC New 52 series is featured incentive variants. Some of them are extremely low printed. And I'll bring up a couple number ones like Constantine and Deathstroke. Those incentive variants at one point were in high demand and have now dropped a good bit. Or Green Lantern Lost Army is another one that those Ben Oliver incentives were in high demand and have now dropped back a good bit. So that's something to really keep an eye on. I could keep naming DC New 52 incentives that I think have great value, but have really kind of depressed in the market. So keep an eye out for that stuff. Also remember that Diamond cleared out a lot of that stuff when they moved out of the New 52. So that is a reason for some of this depression in value. But Brian mentioned it a few picks ago. The comic book market is cyclical. There's a good chance many of these will come back around. And now is the time to be looking in those $5 variant boxes that we all see at conventions and pull some of these amazing cover arts, first appearances, rare cover appearances, and go ahead and add those to your whole box and be ready for when they pop on the secondary market so you can be first to market.
With that being said, we're going to roll right into the next cold pick, and it comes from the Reading Pile author, Dan Piercy.
Now, for my cold pick this week, I have a bit of an interesting scenario. Now, I received this comic book in the mail, and I opened it up, and I found they had used this t-shirt as packing material for the comic. Now, while I applaud that ingenuity, they're obviously thinking outside the box. I'm not sure we should be using t-shirts as packing material for comic books. I mean, there's just so many things to consider. They happen to get the print right. I like Wolverine. How did they know that? The size is an XL. I wear an XL, but what if it had been a small or a medium? I would have been upset. Is it cotton or is it tri-blend? You know, is the shirt clean? So my cold pick for the week is t-shirts as packing material for comic books. Don't do that. See you next time.
So there we have it, Jack. Dan got himself a grab bag, right? Got a subscriber box with the t-shirt and a book. But yeah, it doesn't make for very good packaging material. And I agree with his pick in general, because you see it a lot of times, people getting comics in the mail that are just poorly shipped, poorly packaged, media mail that has been inspected by the USPS, which you're not supposed to send comics through media mail if you're watching, but he has a good point, and you see it all the time. People posting pics and talking about how they've bought comics and they've just been poorly shipped. And it's even from publishers. I mean, sometimes you get stuff from the publisher, order a hot book, and it comes unbagged, unboarded, just in a box, and it's You just pray that it gets to you in good condition. But what do you think, Jack?
Well, I love this pick. I know that's something I say a lot, but I love it because it's not about a comic book. It's not about a specific series or character. We are talking the kind of guts of what it is to be a speculator, the process of what it is to sell books. And I'll tell you, there's a great article on comicbookinvest.com written by Paul Wiederhold, who's a member of the Tales from the Flip Side podcast, and it's how to ship a comic book kind of the CBSI way. I suggest everybody go check that out and read it. It doesn't mean you have to do exactly what Paul says, but it gives you an idea of the standard of comic book shipping that you should be adhering to. There's simple things like make sure you're purchasing actual comic book mailers. Make sure you're using real cardboard between your books. If you follow me on Instagram, you'll see I posted recently a TMNT 51 incentive, one of the hottest books on the market right now. I'm a little mad TMNT did this hot list this week, but I got it in and it was stuffed in my mailbox. And I can be mad at the mailman for even thinking to do that, especially when the envelope said do not bend on it. But the reality is what this person did, this seller did, is they cut the priority boxes and used those as cardboard fillers, trying to save money. Those are flimsy as can be and do not protect the book whatsoever. You might as well not even put them in there. And kind of the rule of thumb is if you can easily take them and book and fold it in half, then you're not using a sturdy enough box. You're not using a sturdy enough cardboard fillers. My biggest suggestion, my bolo to all of you out there in the Simpleman's Comics family is if you're selling books, go on Uline, go on eBay, go on Amazon, go wherever you feel comfortable going and purchase comic book selling supplies. Get yourself some bubble wrap. Get yourself some cardboard inserts. Get yourself some painter's tape. Get yourself some Gemini mailers or whatever kind of company you feel comfortable with. But invest in the presentation and preservation of your books when you're shipping them. It makes a big deal to the buyer. It'll stop you from getting so many returns. And we've all been in the position that I spoke of when I got my TMNT 51 in the mail, or the crazy position that Dan's speaking of having a t-shirt wrapped around his comic. We've all gotten these kinds of ridiculous shipments. And it's really sad when you're able to find a book you want, buy it at a price you're comfortable, excited to get it in the mail. And then it comes in and the seller just didn't put that same level of enthusiasm that you feel for the book into shipping the book. And you can be the greatest comic speculator in the world. You can have the foresight to see every first appearance coming. You can hit your LCS on Wednesday and dominate being a Wednesday warrior. You can get that book immediately listed and sell at an amazing price. But if you can't ship it properly and you're getting damages and returns from your customers, then it doesn't matter. You did all of that for nothing. So make sure you're investing your time, energy, and finances in shipping your comic books. Don't worry about the cost. That's the cost of doing business. And you need to factor that in. And that's also why previously we had on the cold list $10 to $15 spec books. Because if you're truly investing in your supplies, that's going to eat into your margin. But it's something to keep an eye out for. And even if you have to charge shipping, I'm an advocate of free shipping. But even if you have to charge shipping and even charge maybe say more than somebody else charges, doesn't matter. Your customers want their books in the condition they're purchasing them in, and they will pay in order to get it.
Right. So, Jack, look up right now. I want you to look up. Look straight up, right? So right above your head right now, I'm putting a card that's going to go right to my video on how to ship a comic book. It shows you basically corrugated cardboard, Uline mailers. So if you're interested in how I pack my comics when I ship them out, definitely check out that card. And we'll put a link to the description below, as well as a link to Paul Wiederhold's article on comicbookinvest.com, because there's people out there that just cut corners, but then there's people out there that just don't know. So we're going to put that information out there for you as well, if you're interested in checking that out. But
absolutely, it was definitely a learning process for me when I got into selling comic books. I've changed my process for packing and shipping books 3 or 4 times in the time that I've been in it. So it's definitely no shame. I don't care how experienced a seller you are. You should definitely read Paul's article and watch Brian's video. You'll definitely be able to learn something.
Yeah. Another hot tip is save the stuff that you buy comics in. If that's good packing material, save it. I have so much bubble wrap from Nick at Slabbed Heroes, and I even keep Gemini mailers just in case I run out of Uline mailers. But yeah, definitely recycle and reuse, man. But great pick from Dan, and we're going to roll right into the next pick, which comes from the Usual Suspects author Peter Renna.
So, my cold pick for this week will actually have to be Betty and Veronica Archie books. These things were scorching hot maybe a month ago, maybe 6 weeks, and now they're cooling off quite a bit. Books like this were moving for $50, and now you can have one for $25. So there's still a little bit of interest in them. It's just nowhere near where it was just a few short weeks ago. So if you're still into the Archie books and some of these more risque covers and the good girl covers, you can probably get them for a little bit cheaper now because everybody's moved on to pre-court horror and some other different types of books, and they've moved off these Archies for now. But there's still a lot of great covers, and there's still some worth picking up. But for right now, I'd have to say these things have cooled off quite a bit, and they'll be my cold pick for this week.
So we have Peter talking about Betty and Veronica books. They were moving the needle. Now they're slowly starting to decline again. But what do you think about this pick, Jack?
Well, this is a pick where I think it's indicative of the comics market today. When these books took off, they caught a lot of us by surprise. You and I both in particular. We weren't aware of what the prices of several of these kind of risque Betty and Veronica covers were going for. And what happens is in the market is somebody brings it up and says, hey, look at these couple sales that have kind of set records. And then more and more people find books, list books, and the prices go up. And the more people talk about it, the more people post about it, the more you see comic influencers referencing these books, the more these books end up making, say, the CBSI Hot 10, or end up on this show. They're getting more and more attention, and the snowball rolls. But we talk about this on a constant basis, both on this show and on the Bolo show, and really every show here on Simpleman's Comics YouTube channel, that the reality of the situation is comic speculators can't keep their attention on everything at once, and buyers don't keep their attention on everything at once. So while these books were being heavily talked about and speculated on in the market just a few weeks ago, now, as attention has moved to other things and other characters and other books, we're seeing these prices depress. And I think that's why if you're a buyer out there, be careful. Not everything that gets kind of talked about and brought up in the market is something that you want to go invest major money in. Just because something's been hot for a few weeks doesn't mean it's going to be hot throughout the course of time. And doesn't mean that these books are going to stay cold forever. They may come back. But it's something that we really want to caution Simpleman's Comics family. And guys, that includes things we talk about. If it includes things that we talk about on any show on this channel, is a lot of times the books that we talk about, they're hot in the market. We're reporting what's going on in the market. So they may be hot in the market right now, but they're hot for a lot of different reasons. And a lot of times people kind of jump on different books, and to reference Brian's shirt again, the FOMO gets real in the market. Again, that's why this character exists. That's why that shirt exists, because it's going on so rampant in the comic market. So I think when the first discussions of these really popular Betty and Veronica issues came up, the FOMO set in for so many, whether it was speculators, collectors, investors, and they ran out and bought these books up. So put them up on eBay. We started to see record prices going for this issue, that issue, that issue. And then suddenly, as attention faded, so did the final auction prices. And now we're seeing the drop in that. So, we always talk about it. Buy what you like, and you'll never be disappointed in your collection. If you love these books and you're buying these books, hey, it's a great time to buy them because they're cheap right now. But that's the danger in the speculation game, is that the market is constantly moving, and you've got to be in and out a lot of times. And unfortunately, I think a lot of speculators put their money into this and now are sitting there holding some of these books. At the same point, these aren't books that are real prevalent in the market, and they're not easy to find. So they may have their time again in the sun. It will really, truly be kind of interesting to see what happens in the future with these issues and whether they gain popularity again in the near future, or if this is just a trend that we're seeing and they're really headed downward and interest has declined.
Right. It's funny that you mentioned the word trend, because I think some of that decline is the trend, where there's some books that legit were rising in price, and then because they got hot, people are out hunting. they saw books that were kind of similar or kind of fit into that kind of trend of, not risque, but, that tongue-in-cheek humor. And those books were kind of picking up because everyone was looking for them. And that's what you saw rise. And now they're just kind of leveling back off, where there are some books out there that are legit worth the money. But then I think those trend books is what you're kind of seeing fall. But
that's a great point. That's a great point, because I think that is spot on too. Is the ones that kind of always had popularity, they're holding their value a lot more than the ones that people tried to say create value when they saw value in other places. Right. And kind of the expected value wasn't what the true value was.
Yeah. So great pick from Peter. And we're going to roll right into the last pick on the cold list this week, coming from Mike Morello.
Hey, everybody. Mike Morello again from CBSI's Cover Tunes, and it's that time. It is cold pick time. And this week is not going to be a popular cold pick, but it is true, and it is Naomi, especially Naomi #1. Mostly I'm going to talk about the A cover, but the B cover as well. Right now there's a big lull with this character. Obviously her first arc just ended. DC still hasn't done anything, even though they said they had big plans for the character. They have not yet delivered on that promise. However, I think they will deliver on that promise eventually, and this book is going to get hot again when she pops up in something bigger, either a movie or some big book where she crosses over with a character. And when that promise comes to fruition, I think you'll see these go back up. Probably not to the heights that they once did. At one point, the initial values were driven by the story and the character, which is really awesome, much like Immortal Hulk was. But then, of course, FOMO kicked in and prices skyrocketed. At one point, a 9.8 sold for $587 of cover A, first print. Just last week, the same 9.8 cover A, first print sold for $108. Across the board, prices are down about 40 to 50% on raws and ungraded. You can get multiple graded copies right now for $125, 9.8 first prints cover A, whereas the average on that book was over $200 just a couple of months ago. Raws are in the same boat. You can get raw copies for $30, $35 right now. Again, A cover, whereas a couple of months ago the average was 65 to 70. B covers are faring even worse. You've got the same kind of deal happening with these. The percentage is roughly the same, that it's down, but prices are lower across the board on the B cover. You can get a 9.8 of the B cover right now for $70, and raws you can get for $25 or $30 as well, which is pretty bad compared to what they were like a couple of months ago. I've been to a few cons already this season. I've seen these on the wall at $25 and $30 raw, and they're still sitting on the wall at the end of the show, which is not a very good sign. So at the moment, they're cold, but I really think that will change. I think DC will deliver on their promise to do something big with this character. So if you missed the boat the first time, now is a really good time to buy the book. And if you're still sitting on some of them, I would say do not dump them, hold them. I believe they will go back up at some point in the near future, but for now, unfortunately, they are cold. So that's my cold pick for the week. Thanks, everybody. Have a good one.
So there it is, Jack. Mike's cold pick, Naomi. We've talked about this on the show when it was hot. It is, no doubt, kind of slumped a little bit, but it's also in kind of a hiatus period, right? We just finished the run, as Mike said. You know what a lot of the hobby lacks is patience, right? We keep being told that DC has big plans for them. It hasn't come to fruition yet, so people are starting to dump their books. But as Mike said, I think it's a great opportunity to be picking those up. Now, if you don't have any loyalty or faith in this character, by all means, get rid of it. But I for sure, if I can find them cheap enough, especially that cover B, that Lupacino variant for cheap, if I find that for $60, $70 at a 9.8, I'm going to pick me up a copy. But what do you think, Jack?
Well, I think people who watch the Simpleman's Comics YouTube channel on a regular basis know I'm very bullish on Naomi. I don't think there's been a more polarizing character in the hobby, in the modern game, in a very long time. I'm talking about a character that as soon as she was created, as soon as she hit the pages of DC Comics, immediately got mainstream media attention. And a slogan that I use on a regular basis here on the channel is follow the money. Brian Michael Bendis, this was his big creation upon coming to DC Comics. I've never seen an acquisition of a writer get more publicity than him coming into DC Comics. His position within DC Comics is a position of authority. he is kind of their main writer right now. And I know that he's a polarizing character. People love him, people hate him. Doesn't matter. He gets talked about a lot. And the key is DC is behind him. So Mike mentioned her showing up in another series. You just mentioned it. Well, Bolo, because Action Comics 1015, Naomi appears on the cover of cover A. She is crossing over into Action Comics. It's a great looking cover. I personally have pre-ordered several copies in expectation of that issue being popular. I also think that Action Comics sometimes gets under-ordered. So, I definitely think that that's one to be on the lookout for. And I agree with Mike. I personally pulled my Naomi's off of eBay. I don't like the prices they're going at now. I'd rather hold on to them. I'm sitting on a 9.8 of the cover A, a few cover A's of first print, some second prints, some third prints, issue 5, some of these other popular issues, and I've got some sets. I think that Naomi is going to come back in the market. I think you hit the nail on the head saying that, speculators, hobbyists in general, there's no patience. And this was also a character where we saw the comic book politicians come into play. And what I mean by that is when the issue shot up in value, again, no doubt it shot up because of the mainstream media attention, which brings in the casual collector, the casual buyer. These copies got bought up. Every speculator ran out and bought every copy they could, put them on eBay. You immediately saw the people who missed out talking negatively about this book. But one thing that makes me feel solid about this book is the reader buzz. Readers enjoyed this 6-issue series. Not every issue was a home run, but in general, those who read the series enjoyed it. And that, plus the mainstream marketing, plus Brian Michael Bendis, plus the fact that we already know she's coming into the Action Comics series, and that's just the beginning, makes me feel really good about this character. I also think with the DC Comics movie slate being a mess, there's a good chance that we could see Naomi at some point, whether on the small screen or the big screen. Anything is possible. And once a character gets hot, these publishers are quick to try to capitalize on that heat. So I like Naomi as an investment. I think that if you've already invested your money in Naomi, then I don't have to sell you. Now is the time to go back and continue to add to your Naomi stockpile. And like Brian said, if you were against it from the get-go, you're probably sitting around saying, see, I told you so. But if I'm right about my initial statement that the reason why this book took off in the first place is the mainstream media attention, which now has become, say, yesterday's news, that can happen again because we know that there's going to be another Naomi series, that they're just taking a break for the artist to work on some of his other projects. And when they come back and Jamal Campbell gets back with Brian Michael Bendis and we get another arc and it comes after whatever revolutions we're going to get from Naomi coming into the Action Comics series and who knows what other series, at some point, these books are going to heat up again. I'm almost certain of it. And the value and the prices that they're sitting at now are just too low, and we'll probably see significant gains. And I think you made a good point pointing out the cover B Lupacchino variant, which just never saw the heat that the cover A Campbell book did. And we talked about this on the channel before. I think that's largely because when these mainstream media sources, and I'm not talking, when I say mainstream media, I mean not comicbookinvest.com, not even comicbook.com. I'm talking about when CNN, when Time Magazine, when the New York Times, when their websites write articles highlighting a comic book series, they tend to only show that cover A. It doesn't matter whether it's an independent series or one of the big two. And when that happens, that's where we're seeing the trends of cover A's doing better than cover B's. We've talked about it with indie books that get optioned, and now we're talking about it with Naomi. But I really think that that cover B is just massively undervalued and a great pickup if you can find it low. So, like Brian said, if you believe in Naomi from the get-go, then you're probably in a buying mode right now. And if you never believed at all, then you probably feel validated for that. But either way, this is a great cold pick because it's a really accurate depiction of where the market is today on Naomi. But like we talk about, where it is today isn't necessarily where it's going to be tomorrow.
Right. I'm not big on Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur. I'm not that big on Riri Williams, but I do kind of like Naomi. I've enjoyed the story. I love Jamal Campbell's art in there. Some people don't like it, but another thing I think of is how popular was Miles Morales when he first came out.
Right. And those books were cheap for so long. People forget that.
Yeah. And who created Miles Morales, by the way?
Brian Michael Bendis.
So you never know. I'm not saying this is going to be the next Miles Morales, but
I am.
For that low buy-in, I'm willing to take the risk on it. And with that being said, that's going to bring us to the end of our hot and cold list. We're going to bring the list right up on the screen right now. Jack, what do you think about the list this week?
I like the list. Disappointed that we're short some pickers again. Very happy that Rod from Just a Weekend in His Comics stepped in. Great guy. Thank you for joining us. We're definitely going to have you back another time to bring us another hot or cold pick. I think that, again, this show is a great depiction of a lot of what's going on in the hobby, a lot of missed segments of the hobby. And like most weeks, I really like the cold picks because the cold picks really highlight buying opportunities, which are important for speculators. There's so many different shows, so many different channels, so many different pieces of content that get put on the internet that talk about hot books, top books, and all of these types of terms, but not enough are highlighting the buying opportunities of cold books. So great job from the comicbookinvest.com team and our contributors who brought these picks. We appreciate it, and you guys really did a great job this week with it.
I also want to second Jack on thanking Rod once again for the guest pick this week. Flash, year one, that was a pick after my own heart because I've been enjoying Flash, so I was like, kudos to that. So if you were watching this during the live premiere, thank you so much. Really enjoy you guys watching. Enjoyed the chat in here. Another place we really enjoy the chat is tomorrow night live, 9 p.m. Eastern. We have the CBSI Bolo show. So if you can, we'd be honored if you join us for that. Another great place. The live chat is always off the hook. There's so many great conversations going in there. Sometimes I get distracted because people are asking kick-ass questions, and they just put a bunch of great information out. Wouldn't you agree, Jack?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, the chat is amazing, and you get so much value, not just from us, but from those in the chat, just sharing information and sharing the wealth with other speculators, collectors, and investors just like you.
Right. It's like CBSI Bolo show, but in the chat we got like comic book happy hour going on, so that's always enjoyable. But once again, I want to thank you guys for watching the hot and cold list. And Jack, you get the last word before we get out of here.
I just want to say to Simpleman's Comics family and everybody watching this show, if you enjoy our content, please go hit that like button. It does a lot for us on the channel. It really helps us out. Make sure you're subscribed so you can get those notifications when we're dropping new content. We've got a lot of plans and a lot of new things coming up. And of course, if you like Brian's shirt, and if you know Brian's catchphrase, with that being said, be sure to head to simplemanscomics.com, hit that merch tab, and check out all of the great Simpleman's Comics merch that we have available for you on the site.
Right. So thank you guys for watching, and we will see you live tomorrow night, Thursday, 9 p.m. Eastern.